Lisa thought she had it all figured out. At 42, she was living what most people would call the perfect life. Her real estate business was booming in the sunny city of Phoenix. She had been selling houses for 15 years and was really good at it. People trusted her. They would call her when they wanted to find their dream home. Every morning, Lisa would wake up in her beautiful 4-bedroom house with the swimming pool in the backyard. The kitchen had granite countertops that sparkled in the morning sun. The living room was decorated with expensive furniture that she had picked out herself. 2 luxury cars sat in her driveway, a white SUV for her daily drives and a red sedan that she loved taking on weekend trips. Her husband Michael seemed like the perfect partner. He worked at an insurance company and always came home with flowers on Fridays. They had been married for 18 years. Their 2 children, Amy, who was 16, and Ben, who was 14, were doing well in school. Amy was on the cheerleading team and Ben played soccer. They lived in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town, where all the houses looked like something from a magazine. Lisa's bank account was healthy. She had saved money for years, always thinking about the future. She wanted to make sure her kids could go to college without worrying about money. She had plans to retire early and maybe travel the world with Michael. Life felt secure and predictable, but sometimes life has different plans. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. Lisa was in her kitchen, making coffee and getting ready for another busy day of showing houses to clients. The birds were singing outside, and everything seemed normal. Michael came downstairs wearing his usual blue suit, carrying his briefcase like he did every morning for the past 18 years. But something was different about his face. He looked pale and nervous. His hands were shaking a little as he put down his briefcase on the kitchen counter. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said in a voice that made her stomach drop. She turned off the coffee maker and looked at him. In all their years together, she had never seen him look so scared and guilty at the same time. "I'm leaving," he said, quietly, not looking her in the eyes. "I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." Lisa felt like the floor had disappeared under her feet. "What are you talking about? Why? What's wrong?" Michael finally looked at her, and she could see tears in his eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of shame. "I've been gambling, Lisa, for 3 years now. I started small, just a few dollars here and there. But it got out of control. I owe a lot of money to some very dangerous people." Lisa sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. Her perfect world was starting to crack, but she had no idea how bad it was about to get. "How much money?" she asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Michael looked away again. $200,000. The number hit her like a truck. That was more money than most people made in 5 years. But Michael wasn't finished. "I took money from our savings account," he continued, "and I took out a second mortgage on the house without telling you. I also used our credit cards. Lisa, I'm sorry, but there's no money left. Actually, we owe more than we have." Lisa stared at him in shock. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of terrible nightmare. But the fear in Michael's eyes told her it was all true. "The people I owe money to. They're not patient," Michael said. "They've been calling me at work. They showed up at my office yesterday. I have to disappear for a while, maybe forever." "What about the kids? What about me?" Lisa asked, her voice breaking. "Amy and Ben can go live with my parents in Colorado. They'll be safe there. As for you," Michael picked up his briefcase, "you're strong, Lisa. You'll figure something out." And just like that, the man she had trusted with her life, her future, and her heart walked out the door. She heard his car start in the driveway, and then the sound faded away as he drove out of her life forever. Lisa sat in her kitchen for hours, staring at the granite countertops that suddenly didn't seem so beautiful anymore. She kept thinking this was all a bad dream and that she would wake up soon. But the silence in the house was real. The empty feeling in her chest was real. Over the next few days, the phone started ringing. First, it was the bank, calling about missed payments on the second mortgage she didn't even know existed. Then it was credit card companies asking about huge bills that Michael had run up. Then came the lawyers and the police, and finally, men in expensive suits who said they were looking for Michael. Lisa learned that Michael had been forging her signature on documents for months. Her real estate license was suspended because the authorities thought she was part of his schemes. All her business accounts were frozen while they investigated. The house went into foreclosure. Everything happened so fast that Lisa felt like she was drowning. One day she was a successful businesswoman with a bright future, and the next day, she was broke and unemployed with no idea how to pay for even basic things like food and gas for her car. Amy and Ben were heartbroken and confused. They couldn't understand how their father could just abandon them like that. Lisa tried to be strong for them, but inside she was falling apart too. When Michael's parents offered to take the kids to Colorado, Lisa knew it was the right thing to do, even though it broke her heart. "We'll be back, Mom," Amy said through tears as they packed their suitcases. "As soon as you get everything fixed, we'll come home." But Lisa knew there might not be a home to come back to by late summer. The bank had taken the house. Lisa had sold everything she could, her jewelry, her furniture, even her clothes, just to survive. She was living in her car, a 10-year-old Honda that Michael had somehow missed when he was stealing everything else. Her first night sleeping in a Walmart parking lot was the scariest night of her life. She had always been the type of person who helped homeless people, giving them money or food when she saw them on the street. She never imagined she would become one of them. Lisa had $127 in her wallet and a suitcase with 3 changes of clothes in her back seat. The woman who used to help families find their dream homes now didn't have a home of her own. As she tried to sleep in the driver's seat, listening to the sounds of cars and trucks in the parking lot, Lisa wondered how her life had gone so wrong so fast. 6 months ago, she was planning a family vacation to Hawaii. Now she was grateful for the public restroom at Walmart and the free Wi-Fi at McDonald's. She had lost everything: her house, her business, her husband, her children, and her sense of who she was. At 42 years old, Lisa felt like her life was over before she even had a chance to fight back. But sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, that's exactly when life gets ready to surprise you in ways you never expected. The weeks that followed were like living in a nightmare that never ended. Lisa quickly learned that sleeping in a car wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Every sound made her jump, every knock on the window from security guards made her heart race. She had to keep moving from parking lot to parking lot, always looking over her shoulder. After the weeks of sleeping in her Honda, Lisa's back was killing her, and she hadn't had a proper shower since leaving her house. She used public restrooms at gas stations to wash her face and brush her teeth. But she always felt dirty and embarrassed. People would look at her strangely when she came out of the bathroom, carrying a small bag with her toothbrush and soap. She found a weekly motel on the bad side of town that cost $80 a week. The room was tiny and smelled like cigarettes and cleaning chemicals. The carpet was stained and the bed was hard as a rock, but it had 4 walls and a door that locked. Most importantly, it had a shower. Lisa took temp jobs wherever she could find them. She worked at a warehouse packing boxes for 12 hours a day. Her hands got cut and bruised from handling cardboard all day, but the job paid cash and they didn't ask too many questions. When that job ended, she cleaned office buildings at night, emptying trash cans and vacuuming floors while everyone else was home with their families. The hardest part wasn't the physical work, it was the shame. Lisa had always been the type of person others came to for help. She was the successful friend, the one who had her life together. Now she was afraid to run into anyone she knew. She avoided the parts of town where her old clients might see her. One day, while cleaning an office building, she saw her own picture on a real estate flyer in someone's trash can. It was from 2 years ago when she was the top seller in her company. The woman in the picture looked confident and happy, wearing an expensive blue suit with perfect makeup and hair. Lisa looked at her reflection in the office window, messy hair, tired eyes, clothes from a thrift store. She couldn't believe they were the same person. When winter came early that year, everything got worse. The little money she made from temp jobs wasn't enough to pay for the motel room, food, and gas for her car. She had to choose between having a warm place to sleep and having enough gas to drive to work. Most nights, she chose work, which meant sleeping in her car again. The cold was brutal. Even with every piece of clothing she owned piled on top of her, she would wake up shivering. Her fingers were so cold she could barely start the car in the mornings. She would sit in McDonald's for hours, buying one coffee and trying to warm up until the manager asked her to leave. That's when someone told her about the Mercy House shelter downtown. Lisa had heard about it before. She used to donate clothes there during the holidays, when she wanted to feel good about helping others. The thought of actually staying there made her sick to her stomach. But she was running out of options. The first time she walked through those doors, Lisa felt like she was giving up the last piece of her dignity. The shelter was crowded and loud. There were women of all ages. Some were clearly dealing with addiction, others seemed to have mental health problems, and some were just like her, regular people whose lives had fallen apart. She was assigned a thin mattress in a room with 20 other women. The mattress was on the floor, and Lisa's space was marked by tape on the concrete. She had never felt so small and invisible in her entire life. The other women barely looked at her. When she arrived, everyone was dealing with their own problems. The shelter had rules, lots of them. You had to be out by 7 in the morning and couldn't come back until 5 in the evening. No personal belongings except what fit in a small bag. No phone calls. After 9 at night, lights out at 10. Lisa felt like she was in prison for the crime of being poor. During the day, she would walk around the city with nowhere to go. The library became her safe place. It was warm, quiet, and free. She could sit there for hours, pretending to read while actually just trying not to think about how far she had fallen. Sometimes she would use the computers to look for jobs, but every application seemed to require an address she didn't have or references from a life that no longer existed. The absolute lowest point came on Christmas Eve. Lisa had been at the shelter for 2 months, and she decided to call her kids in Colorado. She hadn't talked to them in weeks because she was too ashamed to tell them where she was living. Amy answered the phone, but she sounded different, distant, and cold. "Mom, where are you?" Amy asked. "Grandpa says you're living on the street because you can't take care of yourself." Lisa's heart broke. Michael's father had always disliked her, and now he was poisoning her own children against her. "That's not true, sweetheart," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just going through a tough time, but I'm going to figure things out." "Grandpa says you're broken," Ben said in the background. Lisa could hear him, but he wouldn't talk to her directly. "He says we're better off here." The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. When Lisa hung up, she walked outside the shelter and sat on the concrete steps in the freezing cold. Snow was starting to fall, and Christmas lights twinkled in the windows of apartments across the street. Families were inside those warm homes, probably wrapping presents and making dinner. Lisa sat there for hours, watching people walk by with shopping bags and smiles, heading home to people who loved them. She wondered if her own children would even remember her in a few years. Would they tell their friends they had a mother who lost everything, or would they just pretend she never existed? For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Lisa thought about just giving up completely. What was the point of fighting so hard if her own kids thought she was broken? What was the point of trying to survive if she had nothing and no one to survive for? She was 43 years old, and she felt ancient. The woman who used to sell million-dollar houses was now grateful for a free meal and a place to sleep on a concrete floor. She had no family, no friends, no job, no home, and no hope. That night, lying on her thin mattress surrounded by strangers, Lisa stared at the ceiling and wondered if anyone in the world would even notice if she disappeared. She felt completely invisible, like she had become a ghost of her former self. But sometimes, when you think you've reached the very bottom, when you're sure there's nowhere left to fall, life has a way of showing you that there are still people in the world who see you. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. In the most unexpected ways, Lisa just didn't know it yet. David Rodriguez was not having a good morning. His alarm clock hadn't gone off. His coffee maker was broken, and his 6-year-old daughter Maya had spilled orange juice all over her school uniform. As a single father trying to run his own small construction business while raising 2 little girls, mornings were always chaos. But every Saturday, no matter how tired or stressed he was, David made time for something that mattered to him. For the past 2 years, he had been volunteering at the Hope Community Center, serving breakfast to anyone who needed a meal. It was something his late wife had started, and after she passed away from cancer 3 years ago, David continued the tradition. "Come on, girls," he called to Maya and her 4-year-old sister Sophie. "We're going to be late, and Mrs. Patterson is counting on us to help set up." The community center was already busy when they arrived. Volunteers were arranging tables and chairs, while the kitchen staff prepared scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee for about 100 people. David's daughters knew the routine. They would help him carry plates and napkins, always staying close to Daddy while he served food to the long line of people who came for breakfast. David had been doing this long enough to recognize the regular faces. There was old Pete, who always asked for extra butter on his toast. There was Nancy, a grandmother who was raising her 3 grandchildren after her daughter got into trouble with drugs. There was Tony, a veteran who had been living in his car since losing his job 6 months ago. But that Saturday morning, David noticed someone new. She was sitting alone at a corner table, as far away from everyone else as possible. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she had that look that David recognized. The look of someone who was trying very hard to be invisible. She was probably in her 40s, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and tired eyes that seemed to stare at nothing. The woman barely touched her food. She held her coffee cup with both hands like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out, even though it was already getting warm outside. Every few minutes, she would look round the room quickly, like she was afraid someone might recognize her. David had learned not to push people too hard when they first came to the center. Everyone had their story, and everyone needed time to feel safe before they were ready to talk. But something about this woman made him want to reach out. Maybe it was the way she sat so perfectly straight, like she was trying to hold onto some last bit of dignity. Or maybe it was the way she looked at his daughters when they walked by, not with the empty stare he saw from people who had given up, but with a sadness that seemed to remember better times. He was refilling coffee cups when it happened. The woman reached for a napkin and accidentally knocked over her cup. Coffee spread across the small table and dripped onto her lap. She immediately started trying to clean it up with her hands, but the coffee kept spreading. That's when she started crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but the quiet, desperate kind of tears that come when something small breaks the dam holding back everything big. She was trying to wipe up the coffee while tears ran down her cheeks, and David could see that she was embarrassed and trying not to let anyone notice. David grabbed some paper towels and walked over to her table. "Hey, don't worry about it," he said gently, helping to clean up the spill. "Happens all the time. Let me get you a fresh cup." The woman looked up at him with red eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm usually not so clumsy. I used to be able to handle things better than this." There was something in the way she said used to be that told David this woman's story was different from most of the people who came to the center. She spoke like someone who remembered being competent, being in control of her life. "Rough morning?" David asked, sitting down across from her with a fresh cup of coffee. She nodded but didn't say anything. David waited. His wife had taught him that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just be present with them. Don't try to fix everything. Don't offer advice they didn't ask for. Just be there. "I'm David," he said finally, "and don't worry about being clumsy. My daughter Maya spilled orange juice all over herself and me this morning. Some days are just like that." For the first time, the woman almost smiled. "I'm Lisa," she said quietly. "Nice to meet you, Lisa. You've been in Phoenix long, Lisa looked down at her coffee. I've lived here for 20 years, but I feel like I don't recognize this city anymore. Or maybe it doesn't recognize me. David understood that feeling after his wife died. He had felt like a stranger in his own life for months. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. David watched Lisa slowly relax, her shoulders dropping just a little bit round them. The community center buzzed with conversation and laughter. His daughters were helping Mrs. Patterson stack plates, chattering away about something that had happened at school. You have beautiful daughters, Lisa said, watching Maya and Sophie. They're lucky to have a dad who teaches them about helping others. They're the best thing in my life, David said. Lost their mom a few years back, so it's just us three now. But they keep me going, give me a reason to get up every morning. Lisa nodded like she understood something about losing the people you love most. When breakfast service started winding down, David realized he didn't want this conversation to end. There was something about Lisa that reminded him of himself right after his wife died, lost but not broken, hurt but not hopeless. I don't want to overstep, he said carefully, but I'm working on a construction job just a few blocks from here. There's a Starbucks next door where it's quiet and warm. If you need somewhere to sit for a few hours, you're welcome to join me for coffee. My treat. Lisa looked surprised. You don't even know me. Why would you want to spend time with a stranger? David thought about that for a moment. Maybe because we're all strangers until someone decides to see us as a person worth knowing. And maybe because you look like someone who remembers what it feels like to care about others. Even when you're going through your own hard time. Lisa stared at him for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if this was real or some kind of trick. David could see her weighing her options. Trust this stranger or go back to being alone with whatever was eating her up inside. I don't have anywhere else to be, she said finally. It was such a simple sentence. But David heard so much pain in those 7 words. This was a woman who used to have places to be, people counting on her, a life full of purpose and direction. Now she had nowhere to go and no one waiting for her. Then let's go get some decent coffee, David said, standing up. And if you want to talk about whatever's got you looking so sad, I'm a pretty good listener. If you don't want to talk, that's fine too. Sometimes it's just nice to sit with someone who doesn't expect anything from you. As they walked toward the door, Lisa stopped and looked back at the community center. I used to donate to places like this, she said quietly. I never thought I'd be the one needing help. David nodded. Life has a funny way of teaching us things we never wanted to learn. But sometimes the people who've been through the hardest times are the ones who understand kindness the best. For the first time since David had met her, Lisa looked directly at him. Why are you being so nice to me? David thought about his wife, about all the times she had told him that everyone deserves to feel like they matter to somebody. He thought about his daughters and the kind of world he wanted them to grow up in. Because, he said simply, everyone deserves to have at least one person in their corner, especially when they're fighting the hardest battles of their life. As they walked out into the warm Saturday morning sunshine, Lisa felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope, not the big, overwhelming kind of hope that promises everything will be perfect, but the small, quiet kind of hope that whispers maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Over the next few weeks, Saturday mornings became something Lisa looked forward to for the first time in months. After serving breakfast at the community center, she and David would walk to the little Starbucks down the street. They would sit at the same corner table, and David would buy 2 large coffees while Lisa slowly began to share pieces of her story. David never pushed her to talk. Some mornings they would sit in comfortable silence, watching people walk by on the sidewalk. Other mornings, Lisa would find herself telling him things she hadn't said out loud to anyone about her real estate, business, about Michael's betrayal, about lying awake at night wondering if her children would ever forgive her for losing everything. David understood loss in a way that most people didn't. When his wife Rachel had been diagnosed with cancer, their whole world changed overnight. He told Lisa about the months of treatments, about trying to keep his business running while spending every free moment at the hospital, about explaining to two little girls why mommy was getting sicker instead of better. The hardest part wasn't watching her fight, David said one morning, stirring sugar into his coffee. It was watching her feel like she was letting us down, like somehow getting sick was her fault. She kept apologizing for things that were completely out of her control. Lisa felt tears in her eyes. I do that too. I keep thinking if I had just paid more attention to the bank statements, if I had asked more questions about where Michael was going in the evenings, if I had been a better wife. Somehow. But you couldn't have known, David said gently. People who love us aren't supposed to lie to us about things that big. That's not your fault. Lisa, that's his fault. It was the first time since everything happened that someone had told Lisa it wasn't her fault. At the shelter, the social workers talked about moving forward and taking responsibility for your choices. Michael's parents blamed her for not keeping her husband happy. Even her own children seemed to think she should have been able to prevent this somehow. But David saw it differently. He saw a woman who had been betrayed by the person she trusted most. And he understood that sometimes life falls apart no matter how hard you try to hold it together. As winter turned into spring, their friendship deepened. David would sometimes text Lisa during the week to let her know about job openings his construction buddies had mentioned. He helped her figure out which temp agencies were legitimate and which ones were scams. When she got a 3-day job cleaning an office building, he celebrated with her like she had won the lottery. Every step forward counts, he would say, even the small ones. David's daughters, Maya and Sophie, began to accept Lisa as part of their Saturday routine. At first they were shy, hiding behind their father's legs when Lisa spoke to them, but gradually they warmed up to her. Maya would show Lisa her drawings from school, and Sophie would insist on sitting next to Lisa during breakfast at the community center. They like you, David told Lisa one afternoon as they watched the girls play on the swings at a nearby park. They don't warm up to people easily since their mom died, but they trust you. Lisa watched the little girls laughing as David pushed them higher on the swings. They're wonderful kids. You're doing an amazing job raising them alone. Some days I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, David admitted. Rachel was the one who was good at all the emotional stuff, talking about feelings, knowing what to say when they were upset. I'm better at fixing broken toys and making pancakes. Sometimes that's exactly what kids need, Lisa said. Someone who shows up every day and makes them feel safe. You're giving them that. The conversation was interrupted when Maya ran over, tears streaming down her face. She had fallen off the monkey bars and scraped her knee badly. David immediately went into dad mode, checking the scrape and cleaning it with a wet wipe from the diaper bag. He still carried out of habit, but Maya was still crying, and she kept saying it hurt too much. Without thinking, Lisa knelt down next to the little girl. You know what, Maya? I bet if we blow on it really gently, like this, it might feel better. She showed Maya how to blow soft, cooling breaths on the scrape. My daughter Amy used to get hurt all the time when she was your age, and this always helped. Maya stopped crying and started blowing on her knee, completely focused on the task. Within minutes, she was smiling again and ready to go back to playing. David looked at Lisa with something like amazement in his eyes. How did you know to do that? I was a mom for 16 years before all this happened, Lisa said quietly. I guess some things you never forget. It was moments like these that reminded Lisa of who she used to be. For months, she had felt like that person was gone. Forever, the competent woman who could solve problems and take care of others. But small moments with David's family were showing her that person was still inside her, just buried under layers of grief and shame. One particularly cold February morning, Lisa arrived at the community center shivering uncontrollably. The shelter's heating system had broken down the night before, and she had spent the night in a room that felt like a freezer. Her lips were almost blue, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee cup. David took one look at her and immediately took off his heavy work jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. The jacket still held the warmth, from his body and smelled like sawdust and aftershave. "Lisa, this is ridiculous," he said, his voice more serious than she had ever heard it. "You can't keep living like this. The shelter isn't safe when they can't even keep the heat on." "I'll be fine," Lisa said automatically, but her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. "No, you won't be fine, and I'm not going to sit here and watch you freeze to death because you're too proud to accept help." David sat down across from her, looking directly into her eyes. "I have a small apartment above my mother's garage. I use it mostly for storage, but it has heat and hot water and a bed. You're staying there tonight." Lisa started to protest. "David, I can't. You barely know me. What will your mother think? What will your daughters think? I don't have any way to pay you back. My mother will think I'm doing what any decent human being should do. My daughters will think we're helping someone who needs help, which is exactly what I want them to learn. And as for paying me back," David paused. "Lisa, you've been helping me more than you know. These Saturday mornings, talking with you, watching you be kind to my girls even when you're going through hell, you've reminded me what it looks like to keep fighting even when everything seems hopeless." Lisa felt tears starting again, but these were different tears. For months, she had felt like a burden on everyone around her. The social workers at the shelter, the temp agency workers, even the other homeless people she met, everyone seemed to see her as a problem to be solved or managed. But David saw her as a person worth helping, worth caring about. "Everyone deserves a safe place to sleep," David continued. "And everyone deserves to feel like they matter to someone. Rachel used to say that home isn't really about the building you're in. It's about feeling safe enough to be yourself. You've forgotten who you are, Lisa. Maybe it's time to remember." That evening, David drove her to his mother's house and showed her the small apartment above the garage. It wasn't fancy, just one room with a bed, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom. But it was clean and warm and quiet. There were windows that looked out over a small garden where David's mother grew tomatoes and roses. "It's not much," David said, setting her suitcase down on the bed, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." Lisa stood in the middle of the room and felt something she hadn't felt in almost a year: peace. Not the exhausting peace of giving up, but the deep peace of finally being safe. "David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "why are you doing this, really?" David thought for a moment, looking out the window at his mother's garden. "Because 3 years ago, when Rachel was dying, I felt like I was drowning, and people kept throwing me life preservers, bringing us meals, watching the girls, just showing up when we needed them most. I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do in life is see when someone is drowning and throw them a rope." He turned back to Lisa. "You're not drowning anymore, Lisa, but you're not quite swimming yet either. Consider this your life preserver until you're strong enough to swim on your own again." That night, for the first time in months, Lisa slept deeply and peacefully. But more than the physical comfort, it was David's belief in her that began to heal something deep in her heart. And wrapping her in his jacket that morning, he had done more than keep her warm. He had wrapped her in the kind of human kindness that reminds you that you're worth saving. Living in the small apartment above David's mother's garage was like waking up from a long, terrible nightmare. For the first week, Lisa would wake up in the middle of the night, panicked and confused about where she was. After months of sleeping in cars and shelters, having four walls and a locked door felt almost too good to be true. David's mother, Rosa, was nothing like Lisa had expected. She was a small, fierce woman in her 70s who had immigrated from Mexico 40 years earlier, with nothing but 2 suitcases and a determination to build a better life for her family. When David introduced Lisa as someone who was going through a tough time, Rosa simply nodded and handed her a plate of homemade tamales. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Rosa said in heavily accented English. "The smart ones know when to say yes." Rosa had her own way of helping that was both practical and kind. She would knock on Lisa's door in the evenings with leftovers from dinner, always insisting she had made too much food. She taught Lisa how to stretch $1 at the grocery store. showing her which stores had the best sales and how to use coupons effectively. When I first came here, Rosa told Lisa one afternoon as they folded laundry together. I was so proud I almost starved rather than ask for help. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night, and it doesn't fill your stomach. Smart people learn the difference between giving up and accepting a helping hand. With a safe place to live, Lisa could finally focus on rebuilding her life instead of just surviving day to day. David helped her understand the legal mess that Michael had left behind. He drove her to meetings with lawyers and helped her separate her debts from his. It was a slow, complicated process, but gradually Lisa began to see a path forward. The hardest part was dealing with the shame. Lisa had always been the type of person others came to for advice and help. She had been successful, confident, someone who had her life figured out. Learning to accept help without feeling like a failure was almost harder than being homeless had been. You know what your problem is, David said one Saturday morning. As they walked to the community center, you think needing help makes you weak, but it doesn't. It makes you human. Lisa had started volunteering at the community center, helping serve breakfast alongside David and his daughters. At first, she felt awkward being on the serving side when just months ago, she had been eating at those same tables, but gradually, she realized that helping others was helping her remember who she was underneath all the pain and shame. There was something healing about seeing other people who were struggling and being able to offer them a kind word or an extra cup of coffee. Lisa found herself naturally gravitating toward the women who looked lost and scared, the way she had looked when David first met her. "You're good at this," said Mrs. Patterson, the volunteer coordinator, watching Lisa comfort a young woman who had just arrived at the shelter with two small children. "Have you ever thought about doing this kind of work professionally?" The idea hadn't occurred to Lisa, but it planted a seed in her mind. She started researching social work programs and housing assistance organizations. Her real estate background, it turned out, was actually valuable in helping people navigate housing resources and understand their legal rights. After 6 months of living in the garage apartment, Lisa got her first real job since everything fell apart. It was with a nonprofit organization that helped families avoid foreclosure. The pay was much less than she had made selling houses, but it felt meaningful in a way her old job never had. "I'm helping people keep their homes instead of just selling them bigger ones they can't afford," Lisa told David excitedly after her first week. "It feels like I'm actually making a difference." David smiled. Rachel used to say that sometimes we have to lose everything to find out what really matters. The mention of Rachel brought up something Lisa had been thinking about a lot lately. Over the months, she had watched David with his daughters, seen how he balanced work and parenting, noticed how he still talked about his wife with love but without the crushing sadness that had been there when they first met. And she had started to realize that somewhere along the way, her feelings for David had grown beyond gratitude and friendship. She cared about him and his daughters in a way that scared her. After Michael's betrayal, she had assumed she would never trust anyone enough to love them again. But David was different. He had seen her at her absolute worst and still believed she was worth helping. He had never asked for anything in return, never made her feel like she owed him. His kindness came with no strings attached, no expectations. The most difficult step in Lisa's healing journey was reconnecting with her children. Amy and Ben had been living with Michael's parents in Colorado for almost 2 years now. The last time Lisa had talked to them, they had seemed angry and distant, convinced by their grandfather that their mother had abandoned them. David encouraged her to keep trying. "Kids are smart," he said. "They might be hurt and confused right now, but eventually they'll be old enough to understand what really happened." Lisa started writing letters, sending birthday cards, making phone calls that often went unanswered. It was heartbreaking, but she refused to give up on her children the way their father had given up on all of them. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in March, almost exactly 2 years after Michael had walked out of their kitchen. Lisa's phone rang, and Amy's name showed up on the screen. "Mom," Amy's voice sounded different, older, less certain. than the angry teenager who had barely spoken to her the year before. "Amy, sweetheart, how are you?" Lisa tried to keep the excitement out of her voice, afraid of scaring her daughter away. "I'm okay, I guess. Mom, can I ask you something? And will you tell me the truth?" "Always," Lisa said. "Grandpa says you chose to live on the streets instead of fighting for us. He says you gave up on our family, but that doesn't sound like the mom I remember." What really happened? Lisa took a deep breath. For 2 years, she had been protecting her children from the full truth about their father's betrayal, thinking it would hurt them less. But Amy was 18 now, old enough to handle the truth. She told her daughter everything about Michael's gambling, about the debts, about losing the house and her business. She explained why she had let them go to Colorado, how she had thought they would be better off with stable housing and schools, while she figured out how to rebuild. Amy was quiet for a long time after Lisa finished talking. "Mom, why didn't you tell us this before?" "Because I wanted to protect you from knowing how badly your father had hurt all of us. And because I was ashamed that I hadn't been strong enough to keep our family together." "But you were the one who got hurt the most," Amy said, and Lisa could hear tears in her voice. "You lost everything, and we abandoned you too." That conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, Amy was making plans to visit Lisa in Phoenix. During spring break, Ben, she said, was ready to talk to his mom again too. 3 years after that first Saturday morning at the community center, Lisa's life looked completely different. She had her own small apartment now, a job she loved, and a relationship with her children that was slowly healing. And she had David. Their relationship had grown naturally over time, built on friendship, respect, and shared understanding of how precious and fragile love could be. David's daughters had accepted Lisa as part of their family, and Lisa had found herself caring for them as if they were her own. On a warm Saturday morning in April, Lisa and David stood side by side at the community center, serving breakfast, just like they had been doing for 3 years. But now they both wore simple wedding bands. And Maya and Sophie called Lisa Mom Lisa with the easy acceptance of children, who had never known a world where love was scarce. As they worked, Lisa noticed a young woman sitting alone at a corner table, barely touching her food, looking lost and afraid. The woman was probably in her 30s, with the kind of careful posture that said she was trying very hard to be invisible. Lisa filled the cups with coffee and walked over to the woman's table. "Mind if I sit with you?" she asked gently. The woman looked up with surprised, frightened eyes. "I don't really talk to people much anymore." "That's okay," Lisa said, sitting down and sliding one of the coffee cups across the table. "Sometimes it's nice just to sit with someone who understands what it's like when life doesn't go according to plan." As Lisa sat with the stranger, offering the same quiet presence that David had once offered her, she understood that this was how healing really worked. Not in one big moment of transformation, but in small acts of kindness passed from one broken heart to another, creating an endless chain of hope. She looked across the room at David, who was helping Maya and Sophie stack chairs, and felt grateful for the long, difficult journey that had brought her to this moment. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're really capable of. Sometimes you have to accept help to learn how to help others. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person who wraps you in their arms when you have nothing becomes the one who helps you. Remember that you were always worth loving, even when you couldn't see it yourself.